Good morning. I'm Stanley Metter, Special Agent in charge of the FBI Richmond Field Office. I'm pleased to be joined here today by Christopher Cavanaugh, United States Attorney for the Western District of Virginia, Colonel Gary Settle, Superintendent of the Virginia State Police, and Christopher Kovleski, Special Agent in charge, National Park Service. We've brought you all here today for an announcement we've been working towards for nearly 3 decades. 28 years ago, 2 women, Laura Winans and Julianne Williams, known by their family and friends as Lolly and Julie, were viciously murdered in Shenandoah National Park. Their murders sparked shock and fear throughout the community and nation. Today, we are proud to stand here and tell you we now know who is responsible for this heinous crime. While we have been eager to share the news, it was most important for us to tell Lolly and Julie's families first. Yesterday, our case agent and victim specialist spoke with the families. This morning, U.S. Attorney Cavanaugh, Colonel Settle, SAC Kovleski, and I also spoke with the families. We can't imagine how extremely hard it is for the family members to receive this information. They've been seeking answers for far too long. Without going into too much conversation, I can tell you they were grateful for the people who worked on this case, for the resources, and for helping to provide closure. Soon after I came to lead the FBI Richmond Field Office in 2021, I was briefed on the unsolved murders of Lolly and Julie. We assigned a new investigative team. The team conducted a methodic review of everything in our case file. They reassessed leads, re-examined evidentiary items, photos, and interviews. One thing we had to look closely at was advancements in DNA and any DNA testing and any additional resources that could be used to support further analysis. I can't stress enough the countless hours in research that went into determining what items would be suitable for retesting. Once we identified those items, our team secured funding through the Department of Justice's Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, also known as SAKI, which is administered through the Virginia Attorney General's Office. The approved grant allowed us to leverage the assistance of an accredited private lab to submit items for analysis. As a result of these examinations, DNA was successfully pulled from several items of evidence. From it, analysts obtained a CODIS-eligible profile. CODIS is the FBI's combined DNA index system. It contains DNA profiles of convicted offenders, unidentified subjects, and missing persons. Today, we are here to tell you our positive match is to Walter Leo Jackson Sr., a convicted serial rapist, originally from the Cleveland, Ohio area. Even though we had this DNA match, we took additional steps and compared evidence from Lolly and Julie's murders directly to a buccal swab containing Jackson's DNA. Those matched results confirm a certainty that is rarely seen. 1 in 2.6 trillion. Sadly, as a result of the retests and further DNA comparisons, we are now able to say both Lolly and Julie were sexually assaulted. Jackson, who went by the name Leo, had a lengthy criminal history, including kidnapping, rapes, and assaults. He was sentenced to prison multiple times. His last arrest occurred in August 2011. Later in 2012, he was convicted of kidnapping and sentenced. He remained incarcerated from 2011 until his death in March of 2018. Once our team identified Jackson, they continued forward, learning more about his activities throughout the years. They coordinated with our partners at the Cleveland Police Department and the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office. As we work to solve additional crimes Jackson may have committed, I would like to note for our law enforcement partners and the public that we identified 2 vehicles used by Jackson. First, a 1984 Chestnut Brown AMC Eagle, which we believe may have been the vehicle used during the time Lolly and Julie were murdered. The picture shown is a similar depiction of the vehicle. It is not the actual vehicle. Second, we identified a 1979 model Ford Econoline van that he was using at the time of his 2011 arrest. The photo depicted is the actual van. Jackson was known to use temporary tags, alter license plates, and frequently changed vehicles. We can now also confirm that Jackson, a residential painter by trade, was an avid hiker with past interests in travel to Shenandoah National Park. I will now turn it over to U.S. Attorney Christopher Cavanaugh.
Thank you, SAC Metter. My name is Chris Cavanaugh, and I'm the United States Attorney for the Western District of Virginia. My office has been working with this new team of investigators that the FBI put in place to investigate the Shenandoah Park murders that occurred in 1996. Towards the beginning of my term as United States Attorney, I was extensively briefed on this matter, and I had the privilege to sit down with the victims' families. And I shared with them that it was in my assessment that without a forensic link to the perpetrator, that this crime may never be solved. I'm so grateful for the hard work of this new team of investigators and prosecutors that has led to this announcement today. Laura Salisbury Winans, known as Lolly, was 26 years old in 1996. She grew up in Grosse Pointe, Michigan. She was an experienced hiker and involved in environmental issues. She was a student at Unity College. Julianne Marie Williams, known as Julie, was 24 years old in 1996. She was from St. Cloud, Minnesota, and also involved in environmental issues and would readily help people in need. She had a degree in geology and also was an experienced hiker. Lolly and Julie met through an organization providing outdoor adventure and educational programs for women, and they planned a trip to Shenandoah National Park in May of 1996, entering the park on May 19th. The two were last seen alive by park personnel on May 24th, 1996, around 5:30 p.m. Their bodies were discovered on June 1st of 1996. We've had an investigation ongoing for the last 28 years, and I can announce that if Walter Leo Jackson Sr. were alive today, in light of what our investigation has uncovered, to include the new forensic evidence, the information that he visited Shenandoah National Park, and evidence of his other crimes, that I would authorize a federal indictment to be presented to the grand jury, charging 2 counts of first-degree murder in the territorial jurisdiction of the United States, that is Shenandoah National Park, for the murders of Lolly Winans and Julie Williams on or about May 24th of 1996. I have no doubt, under any standard, that Walter Leo Jackson Sr. committed these murders, and in light of the strength of the evidence, I firmly believe that we would be able to prove this case to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt and obtain convictions on these charges. Moreover, in addition to the murder charges, our investigation has uncovered additional evidence through the new forensic testing that shows that the victims were sexually assaulted. And I would also authorize the indictment to include 2 counts of aggravated sexual abuse in the territorial jurisdiction of the United States in Shenandoah National Park. If Jackson were alive and we could take this case to trial, in addition to this forensic evidence, the government would also present evidence of 3 other crimes, sexual assaults, committed by Jackson. This evidence would be relevant and admissible to proving his intent, common scheme or plan, and identity. First, on June 5th of 1996, just days after the events that occurred in Shenandoah National Park, Jackson had returned to Cuyahoga County, Ohio, where he forcefully kidnapped and raped a woman as he held a knife to her throat. Second, a little over 1 month later, on July 16th of 1996 in Cuyahoga County, Ohio, Jackson broke into a dwelling, kidnapped, and raped a woman, again at knife point. Jackson was not initially identified in this investigation, and he remained at large. These 2 sexual assaults in June and July of 1996 occurred within just 2 months following the Shenandoah Park murders. Third, 15 years later, 7 of those intervening years Jackson spent incarcerated on a separate crime. In 2011, Jackson violently abducted and raped a woman, again in Cuyahoga County, Ohio. But this time he was arrested, charged, and pled guilty to kidnapping, gross sexual imposition, and felonious assault. While serving a sentence, Jackson was forensically linked, not unlike what has occurred here. He was forensically linked to the prior kidnapping and rapes that had occurred in June and July of 1996, that had taken place 18 years prior, the events that happened in the months following the Shenandoah Park murders. In 2014, he was charged with those 2 crimes that he committed in June and July of 1996. He went to trial, and with the forensic evidence, as well as the testimony of the 2 victims in those cases, a jury unanimously convicted Walter Leo Jackson of 2 counts of rape and 2 counts of kidnapping, and he was sentenced to an additional 20 years in prison. Notably, all 3 of these crimes were committed by Jackson alone. Had this matter proceeded to trial today, given how close in time these crimes occurred to the Shenandoah Park murders, the manner in which they were committed, the fact that a weapon was used and how it was used, the evidence of sexual assault, and his ultimate convictions, we would seek to introduce evidence of these crimes under the federal rules of evidence as relevant to prove his intent, knowledge, common scheme and plan, and although we wouldn't need it given the strength of the DNA evidence, also his identity. There are a couple of other topics that I would like to address. First, as I've made clear, one of my top priorities as United States Attorney has been the increased awareness and reporting of, as well as the vigorous investigation and prosecution of, hate crimes. Hate crimes are those that are committed against individuals because of someone's membership in a protected class, because of race, color, religion, national origin, gender identity, disability, and also sexual orientation. It's critically important to call out hate crimes for what they are, because their effects are felt not only by the victims who are physically injured, but also by a whole class of persons. The burden is high in these cases because, unlike in almost all other types of crimes, in a hate crime, you have to prove why someone did what they did. You have to prove that but for someone's membership in a protected class, the crime would not have occurred. Here, it has been publicly reported that Lolly Winans and Julie Williams were members of the LGBTQI+ community. Make no mistake, this crime was brutal. This crime was definitionally hateful. Nevertheless, we do not have any evidence that the victims were selected for, or that Jackson had any knowledge of, or was otherwise motivated by their membership in a protected class. And if the evidence showed otherwise, I would say it. I bring this to attention only because I anticipate this was a question in light of public statements that have been associated previously with this case. Second, 22 years ago, a federal grand jury, at the request of the United States Attorney's Office for the Western District of Virginia, returned a federal indictment charging another individual, Darrell Rice, with the murders of Lolly Winans and Julie Williams. That case was not built on forensic evidence. Even 22 years ago, in a public filing, the United States Attorney's Office made clear that the forensic evidence in the case did not implicate Rice. In October 2003, in the lead up to that trial, according to a public filing, the United States Attorney's Office moved to continue that case because the government's experts concluded that DNA materials located on crime scene evidence was of male origin, excluded Rice, and was most likely that of the perpetrator. And faced with this, the assistant United States attorneys at the time did the right thing and moved to dismiss the case, notwithstanding the obvious and intense public pressure to proceed and hold someone accountable. It was in a retesting of the crime scene evidence that developed the profile that was uploaded into the national database that led us to Walter Leo Jackson Sr., ultimately resulting in a finding that there was a 1 out of 2.6 trillion chance that it originated from someone other than Walter Leo Jackson Sr. I've prosecuted many homicides and cold cases, and I have never witnessed statistics that high. So we conclusively know of Jackson's involvement for forensics, and we have no credible forensic evidence linking Rice or any other names associated previously with this case to the crime. But even putting forensics aside for a moment, we also see no connection or association, social or otherwise, between Jackson and Rice, or between Jackson and any of the other names that had ever been related to this case. And again, I note that Walter Jackson Leo Sr. committed the 3 other sexual assaults that I mentioned alone. And that is why, again, if he were alive today, we would seek a single defendant indictment charging Walter Leo Jackson Sr. with these crimes and no one else, and we feel confident that we would defeat any claims that someone else and not Jackson was responsible. A few remaining notes in conclusion. First, I want to thank the Department of Justice's Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, which provided the funding for our retesting of the evidence in this case. I am so appreciative of this program and what it has done to solve these types of offenses throughout the country. Second, I want to personally thank Special Agent in Charge Stanley Metter for his leadership, as well as Special Agent Jade Lachlan for her perseverance and tenacity. Without either of these 2 individuals, we would not be here today. Third, I want to thank the Virginia State Police and the National Park Service for their continued partnership in this case and the many other cases that we have. This is what we do, the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the law enforcement community. We will continue to faithfully and dispassionately investigate, work to find answers, no matter how long it takes. We don't give up. Last and finally, I want to close by extending my condolences again to the families in this matter. They have waited so long. They have lost so much. And it is my hope that this announcement today provides some small measure of solace to the families. Thank you.
Even though Jackson is deceased, our work doesn't end. We are piecing together a timeline of Jackson's movements to share with our partners to assist them with unsolved cases. Per our contact with the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections, Jackson was incarcerated from the following dates: January 1984 through February 1989, May 1994 through September of 1994, August 2000 through May of 2007, and May of 2012 through March of 2018. One case you may ask about is the murders of Rebecca Dowski and Kathy Thomas, also known as Incident Number 1 of the Colonial Parkway murders. We can definitively say Walter Leo Jackson Sr. is not responsible since he was in prison at the time. We can also say that he is not associated with incidents number 2 or number 3 of the Colonial Parkway murders. In the FBI, we work to find ways to push all cases forward and bring justice for victims. It doesn't matter how long it has been or the challenges we face. Our investigation will not stop. We will continue working with our partners to determine if Jackson is responsible for other unsolved crimes. We encourage anyone who may have additional information on Jackson to contact us at 1-800-CALL-FBI or online at tips.fbi.gov. I do want to take a moment to personally thank United States Attorney Kavanaugh, Colonel Settle, SAC Kovleski, as well as all of their team members for their continued partnership and dedication on this case. I also want to thank the countless number of other law enforcement partners and community members from across the Commonwealth and nation who throughout the last 28 years worked hard to bring justice for Lolly and Julie. Lolly and Julie were genuine, authentic, and caring people. They volunteered in their communities, worked hard in school, and we know they absolutely loved the outdoors. Their murders were a deep loss for their families and friends. No one can begin to imagine the pain Lolly and Julie's families have endured for the last 28 years. On behalf of the FBI, we know there's nothing we can say today that will ease their pain. We do, however, hope that this information will help move the families forward in the healing process.